The war has begun. What was, until recently, a strategic debate about escalation has now crossed into reality. Strikes have hit Iranian territory. Military assets are moving. Airspace is tense. The region has stepped beyond rhetoric. This is no longer about warnings, red lines, or diplomatic signaling. This is an active military phase. The question now is not whether escalation is possible. The question is how far this goes and how fast. Was this a calibrated strike designed to reset deterrence? Or is this the opening move in a broader campaign meant to permanently reshape Iran's strategic position in the Middle East? Military actions at this level are never spontaneous. They are timed. They are modeled. They are based on intelligence assessments, nuclear thresholds, alliance calculations, and long-term geopolitical strategy. For months, the indicators were visible. Sharper rhetoric around Iran's nuclear progress, increased American military posture in the region, evacuation advisories, growing coordination among regional partners. These are not symbolic gestures. They were preparatory steps. Now the preparatory phase is over. The United States has entered a moment that could remain limited or evolve into something much larger. History teaches a simple lesson. Once the first strike is launched, events tend to move faster than the strategies that initiated them. We are now at that inflection point. Why now? Timing is everything in strategic warfare, and the most important variable in this equation is the nuclear threshold. When a state approaches a level of capability that fundamentally shifts the regional balance of power, the logic of prevention intensifies. From Washington's perspective, waiting carries risk. If Iran reaches a point where deterrence becomes dramatically more complicated, the cost of inaction increases. Strategic planners operate under the principle of the window of opportunity. If that window appears to be closing, pressure builds for decisive action. But nuclear timing is not the only factor. Regional dynamics have been shifting. Iran's network of proxy actors remains active across multiple theaters. Maritime routes through the Strait of Hormuz remain strategically vulnerable. Gulf states have recalibrated their own security postures, and global energy markets are perpetually sensitive to any signal of instability. In this environment, hesitation can be interpreted as weakness. Decisive action can be interpreted as escalation. The United States now finds itself walking a narrow line between deterrence and expansion. So what exactly is Washington trying to achieve? If this is a limited strike, the objective is likely strategic containment. Degrade specific capabilities, reassert deterrence, and send a clear message without triggering full-scale war. But if the objective extends beyond immediate deterrence, if it includes long-term weakening of Iran's military infrastructure or altering the trajectory of its nuclear development, then we may be witnessing the early phase of a sustained campaign. The difference between those two paths is enormous, and much depends on Tehran's response. Iran has options: direct retaliation against U.S. assets in the region, proxy activation across Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, or Yemen, cyber operations, maritime disruption in the Strait of Hormuz. Each carries different escalation dynamics. Direct confrontation raises the immediate risk of rapid expansion. Proxy escalation creates a layered battlefield that is harder to contain. Maritime disruption introduces global economic shock into the equation. Oil markets are already sensitive. Energy supply routes are fragile under stress. Any prolonged instability in the Gulf reverberates far beyond the region. That is why this is not simply a Middle East conflict. Russia is watching. China is calculating. European allies are assessing exposure. Energy importing economies are preparing for volatility. The ripple effects of this conflict extend into global supply chains, inflation trajectories, and financial stability. The strategic chessboard is wider than it appears. But the most dangerous variable is miscalculation. Wars often begin with carefully defined objectives and tightly modeled risk assessments. They expand when assumptions collide with reality. An unexpected retaliation, a misinterpreted signal, a civilian casualty event that shifts public sentiment. a cyber attack that crosses a psychological threshold. Escalation is rarely linear. It accelerates through feedback loops. That is why the next 48 to 72 hours are critical. If Iran's response remains calibrated, space for containment still exists. If retaliation crosses certain thresholds, U.S. casualties, major maritime disruption, direct strikes on allied territory, escalation becomes significantly harder to control. And then we enter a different phase entirely. There is also the domestic dimension. In the United States, military engagement reshapes political landscapes quickly. Congressional dynamics shift. Public opinion polarizes. International alliances tighten or fracture depending on perception of legitimacy and proportionality. This is not just a military operation. It is a geopolitical event with domestic consequences. Yet one crucial point must be emphasized. Large-scale war is not inherently in the rational interest of any primary actor. The United States seeks deterrence and strategic leverage, not open-ended regional entanglement. Iran seeks regime survival and regional influence, not annihilation. Gulf states seek stability. Israel seeks long-term security balance. Even major external powers prefer controlled instability over systemic collapse. The danger lies not in deliberate pursuit of total war, but in cumulative escalation driven by signaling, retaliation, and strategic pride. Right now, we're in a phase where both sides are testing boundaries. This could remain a contained episode, a sharp, forceful exchange that redefines deterrence lines and then stabilizes. Or it could become the opening chapter of a new regional order shaped by sustained military pressure and prolonged instability. The difference will depend on three factors. First, the scale of Iran's response. Second, the clarity of U.S. strategic limits. Third, the willingness of regional actors to prevent spillover. If containment logic prevails, this becomes a short, intense military episode. If escalation logic takes over, we may be witnessing the beginning of a broader confrontation that reshapes the Middle East for years to come. At this stage, the war has begun, but its final form is not yet determined. The initial strike may define the moment, but the response will define the trajectory. And trajectory is what decides whether history records this as a controlled operation or the start of a regional war with global consequences.